So we're starting with the Injora roll cage body shell. It's carbon fiber and aluminum. And I think this is aluminum, yeah. All the trays are aluminum. Yeah. And yeah, we're gonna throw her together. We don't have our skid yet. We're waiting on a skid actually. If we had room, we would try to use this skid with this motor, because that'd be fun. It's the FCX. And this is an SCX mountable skid for the FCX motor, so we can throw an FCX motor in an SCX chassis. It's just you have to have room because the motor sticks outside the chassis quite a bit. So unfortunately, can't do that here unless we want to cut all this out, but we do not want to do that, so we're going to use a regular skid. Anyway, we're going to put this together. All these screws are a 1.5, and it's easiest just to put all of these on one side first. It also comes with a bag of nuts, little tiny nuts, and we're assuming those are for your shocks? Question mark? I assume they're for the shocks. There's 6 of them. Gives you 4 and 2 extras to mount your shocks, because there's nothing for your shock bolts to mount into. The screws have nothing to actually mount into. They're just holes, so you need a nut on the back side. Let's just check these. They should be good though. Yeah, they're good. And you can pop these off, these little side panels, if you did have a motor that needed to stick out through this little square here. You definitely could pop those off, but we like them. They look cool. Alright. One side all done. Now you can put in all your trays, or panels, however you want to look at it. And this stuff will probably get moved around at some point based on how we do the build. I think this goes here toward the front, or the back I mean. I want to make sure our little logo is facing the correct direction. I guess the tray goes all the way across, so depending on what kind of motor we're going to use, we may have to pop this tray out. I don't know yet. So we're just going to put it together how it is shown in the Injora, on the Injora website. We're not going to screw this all the way down until we're sure we've got all the panels in. So we're just going to get our screws started on the front and the back, and then we can get all our panels kind of snapped in on both sides. Make sure it's on both sides, and get our screws in all the way tight. So we're tight everywhere. Seems like there's still just the trays kind of are still loose even though we're tight, which kind of sucks because it's got like a rattly sound to it. I wish that the trays were actually pressured onto, so meaning that all of these braces were slightly, just maybe a ½ millimeter total shorter than the trays were. That way the trays are what's being kind of pressed onto, and they're held nice and tight and they're not wobbling around. Not that it's a big deal. You can always tighten that up or trim these down. You know, just take them on a piece of sandpaper, sand them down just a little bit, and it would tighten it up onto the trays, because I do not like the rattly sound. It just sounds cheaply put together, even though this is not. It just feels like, you know, if you're driving especially a monster truck and it's just like rattling and stuff, that doesn't sound good. So just some tolerances could be a little better on that. The tray should be a little bit wider, just a tad. Not huge. Anyway, cool looking chassis, right? Got these monster truck tires. Let's open these up. Let's open these bad boys up. Feel kind of good. I wish they were a little more balloony. Wish they weren't so square. They're kind of square. They do have foams in there. What do we think? What do those foams look like? Let's open them up. Let's look at that. They're pretty thick. The tire walls here, or the bead, the way it kind of pushes in. Can we get it out? I don't want to tear them. There we go. Those are some good sized foams, huh? They are shaped well with the tire, so that's nice. They're not just perfectly square, you know, cut off. They actually have a little bit of a angle on them, which means they fit the actual shape of the tire pretty good, it looks like. That might just be from them being in there for so long. Or it could actually be cut. I don't know. Doesn't look too compressed, so I wonder if this is, doesn't feel quite as sticky as like the pin comps, so I don't know if it's the same compound, but not that you want these to be super sticky or anything, but you do want them to grip, right? So I was just curious, maybe they're using the same compound, you know, saves them money, and it works. They're pretty grippy, they're pretty sticky. I just kind of wish they were a little more ballooned, you know, kind of like that shape naturally. I don't know if you can see that's a little more rounded up through here versus being a little flat. Kind of more rounded. Actually, I think the model ones. Let's look at the model ones. So we got the AMT monster truck 125th. Yeah, see, they're more rounded, and they don't need to be this round. But I would like them a little less square. You know, one thing about these is look at the backs. Look at how large diameter the rear is, and then the front is a smaller diameter. They actually are two different diameters. Let's see, just in case you didn't know, the front and the backs are different. So just to compare, the Injoras are a little larger. Maybe not once you include how they're rounded. They might be about the same actual height. Here, let's do this. The widest point looks about 67. Okay, and on the Injoras, just slightly larger. Make sure we're on the treads, not dip it in. 69. They're about a millimeter different. Maybe two. Yeah, about 2 millimeters different. The rears are about the same diameter there. If you were to use the monster truck AMT rears, you can't use the fronts, obviously. Can't use those wheels anyway. Just saying though, they're close. Very close. I do like how on the monster trucks they are much bigger looking, right? The sidewall is much taller because this is a much smaller outer diameter versus here. They could have done something similar on these, but probably would have been. I don't know what the other monster truck tires look like as far as are they the same or what size rim are they. You know, these rims, we can look here in a second. I guess I could have left it off, but these rims look like they're about 36 millimeters, which is 1.4. So yeah, they're 1.4. So they probably wanted to just make sure that the rims were a standard size versus like these goofy one size is different, one side different on the other. Anyway, I like the look of these. They're more monster trucky looking, but I get it. Would have been cool to do these on 1-inch wheels. That would have been nice. 1-inch wheel with the big old fatty sidewall. Should look pretty cool though. We're doing something sort of like so. But yeah, with our truck body. It's gonna be rough. We'll have to probably cut into the bed. Almost about the right width. Look at that. Almost perfect. I know this isn't intended to be a monster truck chassis, but we can cut this bed in deeper, slide this all the way in. That could be pretty cool looking. Kind of sucks that it sits so high, because that does not work out on the inside. I don't know. We'll have to mess with it. And here's some of the shocks we're going to use. Let's open these guys up. We're going to try to do something like this. Or like this. No, shocks. Reservoirs to the outside. We'll probably do that. Maybe. I don't know. We'll see. But that's going to be the plan. So we're thinking something sort of like this. A tip when trying to put these on, these little screws and nuts, get your wrench on your screw, make sure it's in there nice and tight, and then just drop your nut on there. So you kind of put your nut on there, right? And then you can slide your nut with your finger to the hole you want and hold it with your finger and then start the screw in just a little bit. And that is generally much easier than trying to hold it with some pliers and make sure that you've got space and trying to turn it and whatnot. If you just hold it, slide it over, and then just get it started a little bit, and then once it's started, you can bring your pliers in and tighten it up. At least that's what we found, you know. So I think we're going to try that. We're going to get the fronts on. We're just kind of mocking it up right now. It may change. It probably will change. I mean, our link length and all that stuff is going to determine a lot of where the shock positioning goes when we get there, and yeah, who knows. I think we're going to have real trouble with our monster truck body on this, so maybe we'll just run it for a while without the monster truck body, and we'll have to figure out a different way to do the monster truck body. Maybe we might even have to change the chassis at some point, but I don't know. We're gonna get it started, and we'll figure it out as we go. So because we're using the FCX axles, we have issue mounting the shocks, obviously, right? Because your links mount to the same spot that your shocks mount to. And you usually have a double ball joint there. But what we're going to do is and this is just here as a placeholder, we don't have links yet that are the right size. So we just have a front wishbone. But we wanted to see about how it's going to sit. And we took one of our servo horns, and we're going to be able to basically mount it like this. And of course we're going to flip our portals upward. And then we'll trim this and stuff and clean it up. But I think we're going to do something along those lines. So that'll get us our double shock going on, our double shock mount. And yeah, we'll definitely clean it up. There won't be play. You know, when we cut this, we'll cut it more accurately. This is just kind of again, we're test fitting stuff right now. So there's a lot of work to go, but yeah, we're excited. So just a couple things of note. These little spacers that come with the Injora shocks, they are the large ones are 2 millimeters, and the small ones are 1. So you can do, 1, 2, 3, 4 millimeter different offsets from the chassis and on the axle to make sure you have correct spacing. And it's very important with these double barrel shocks that they are straight. You don't want them, canted in any way on the axles or to the chassis. You want them straight, otherwise they're going to bind. Another thing of note, if you don't already know, these ball joints, these little pivot balls, they have a side that is larger and a smaller side. The larger side I like to put towards the outside. That way the shock can't just pull off, right? It's never going to pull off. Worst case, it goes inward because it is small enough to just pull them through. See that? I literally just pulled it through and the O-ring came off. So I like to make sure the outside is the larger portion of the ball joint. Also, if you have issues with binding or you feel like your shocks aren't freely moving enough, remove one of the O-rings. I recommend removing the outside O-ring, leaving the inside so that you have a little bit of extra spacing in there. But you can definitely remove an O-ring if you find that you're binding. I don't think we're going to have that much of an issue here. We're not flexing a ton because we're doing kind of the monster truck thing. So we put all the O-rings in. But again, if you're binding, make sure that that's not happening. You know, it's not from the O-rings, and that your shock is perfectly straight. Okay. Now, because we're using the FCX axles, you need a 2mm eyelet, or ball joint. While your shocks are gonna, if you're using SCX shocks, your SCX shocks are gonna be the 1.3. Also, all the mounts here are 1.3. So you need a 2 on here, but a 1.3 everywhere else. Our solution to that is going to be the Injora links that you can that have the adjustable rod ends, and then some of the Amazon rod ends that are the 2mm. That way we can do a 1.3 end. This is the Injora end with the Injora ball joint, and then I think they're Unicell or XL or whatever. Those ends, they're the same threading, even though it's a larger larger rod end and ball joint. These are the 2mm. Now the issue that we're going to have is going to be the shocks, because you could not put a 2mm through here and through the shocks. But because we're running double shock, we're using this guy here. So we're going to make some shock mounts. Basically, that'll allow us to put our link in and our shock mount in, and then our shocks can mount to here. So we're going to get some of this together, and we'll come back and show you.
A few moments later.
All right, so we figure we'll do something sort of like this. You can see we clocked the portal back a little bit. We can flip them upside down as well. We thought about doing that to make it really low COG. It's going to be real wide because these FMS axles are super wide. But yeah, so we can adjust them. We can put them back to normal. That way it's more centered. We can push them forward. One of the cool things about these axles. Now the fronts are going to be a little more difficult because they have steering linkage and stuff like that in the servo. So I don't know how much we're going to be able to clock those, if at all. But we're going to mess with that and get it together. Our whole axle is clearly clocked back, rotated this way. You can see like those portals are supposed to be straight down, and they're clearly clocked backwards. So our drive shaft is pointing up a little bit, which isn't bad because you kind of do want your drive shaft pointing up a little bit if you're going to be doing something like this, but it might be too much. So we might have to shorten our top links or lengthen our bottom links, do something different with our links. But again, we're just trying to get it together right now and see what it looks like, and then we'll make adjustments from there.
More moments later.
All right, so here we are. Now we're not mounted up on our wheels and tires yet. There's some issues there. The FCX axles are larger. I think they're like 3mm versus 2mm. So we have to get some of the, we don't have any of the FCX wheel hexes. So we're going to take some of these aluminum ones and drill them out and get them on there. But just wanted to show for now, we got our shocks all set up. You can see how the axle portals are clocked. This is the normal clocking because our axle is slightly tilted. And then I've got it clocked back here. We may go back one more, which will extend it even further, but I'm not sure yet. You can kind of see the difference in how far back it goes. All right, so it actually puts it back quite a bit. If we go one more, it'll lower it a little more and move it back even further. I kind of like where it's at now. I don't know if we're going to flip them. Maybe we'll flip them all the way just to see, and flip the fronts all the way just to see, and see how low it drops the whole thing. But for now, I kind of like it like this, even though we originally intended on dropping it and flipping the portals all the way. Also, we were worried about our monster truck body, our model body, because this shape does not fit at all. And we're thinking maybe this isn't the cab at all. Maybe it's just the chassis itself, and the whole thing just sits on top. What do you think? Something like that? Let's flip it around. So here's the other side, the shorter wheelbase. You can see it's shorter. Throw that on there. Maybe even better. Something like so. I don't know. Could be good. Again, we know it's not a monster truck chassis, but we wanted to make it one. We like the challenge, the shock mounting. Let's go ahead and pull these off and I'll show you. That's how we're kind of set up for now. The fronts we had to trim a little more. Our links. The shocks are unequally compressing, but we're not worried about that. You can see this one is more compressed than this one. Not a big deal. It's the same on the rear. We could drop it further down, but then we have an issue of it hitting our links, potentially. This one definitely would. We had tilted our links inward just a little to get us some more clearance over here, as well as make sure we're not hitting, because they were high clearance, right? But then they start hitting because the geometry is kind of funky with the FCX axles. But it works. I mean, it's not like it doesn't have some decent flex. It still flexes pretty well. Not that you want a ton of flex on a monster truck, but the rear is a little stiffer than the front. But again, overall, it's not bad. You may be asking, why are they mounted like this on the inside? And well, you don't want your shocks going like this, especially these double barrels. So again, because of the way the axles are set up, we mounted it towards the inside. We were originally going to put them on the outside, but it makes way more sense from a geometry standpoint that they go on the inside. Yeah, we think it'll work. We may have been better off with some straight links versus the high clearance links, but I don't know. We're going to try these for now. I think I like them. And our shocks are pretty stable. They don't really, the fronts are really good because they push up against the knuckles here. Or not the knuckles, but the C-hubs. You can see that they push against them, and it keeps them pretty stable. The rear's a little bit more loose. We could probably adjust that and trim these differently next time. We're just having to eyeball it for now, but they don't really move once they're set. I'm having to push, and you have to push pretty hard. But yeah. And I think our rear binding mostly has to do with the links kind of hitting on each other. Also, these are at an extreme angle, so you can see already that the link kind of rubs, especially when they were straight, right? So that's another reason why we kind of tilted them inward, took the high clearance and moved it inward, so that there was less angle here. The reason there's so much angle is because these mounting points on the FCX axles are much further out than an SCX. You can see here. So these should be in there, right? The links are actually supposed to be mounted inside of here. So they should go exactly in the middle of this. This link should be all the way over here, and this link should be all the way over onto this over here. We could try putting them on the inside. The problem with that is there's no good way to get a screw in. How do you get your screw into the inside? We were going to do that, and if these came apart, we would do that, even though it'd be a pain for maintenance and changing links and stuff. But we would have mounted the links on the inside. But yeah, getting a screw in there is not easy. We could run a screw all the way through, a real long screw, and have it protrude out the other side, and then put a nut on that side, maybe a washer and a nut. That could work, and it'll allow us to move our links inside. But we're okay with this. Again, it's a monster truck. It's not a crawler, and we don't need a ton of flex. And this is plenty. I mean, combine that with the front, like that's pretty ridiculous flex. Probably more than you really want on a monster truck anyway. All right, we're kind of rambling. Let's go. This is where we're at. We're going to link to everything in the description below that we used. This is a ZWooG, I don't know, some Amazon skid plate, basically the cheapest one, because a skid plate's kind of a skid plate unless you're doing something crazy, and in this case we don't care about it being flat or brass or anything like that, so we went ahead and just did that. We also have the Benedict Harry metal transmission in there, so you can check that out. It's just a standard transmission. Who knows, maybe we'll end up changing it, doing the gears and making it super fast and all that, but again, right now we're just trying to get a working monster truck. You can see we pulled off the fronts. We already did the backs. That's what it looks like with the portals flipped. It's pretty low, but not crazy low. And then we're going to flip the front. We also had it extended so it was going straight out the back, so it extended the wheelbase, which is pretty cool because you can get your wheelbase out to about here. So if you want to adjust it, that's one way to get along a wheelbase. And then to do the front, you have to flip. You can't just turn the hubs because of the steering. You have to actually flip it to the other side and then move all your steering links to the top. So that's what we're going to do here. So on some of these axles, depending on when you got them, they'll have these little tabs on there and little grooves. It's like they don't want you to rotate them, but I want to rotate them, so we're going to snip this off. basically just gonna cut it. Goodbye. And goodbye. Why limit us? Why? Maybe they were worried about the screws not actually holding it in. This seems fine to me though. Alright. And now we should be able to put our axle on. And our C-hub upside down. Ta-da! Like so. Can we rotate it just a little more? It's going to mess with the way we set up our shocks if we rotate it too much. Because it would be nice to get that little bit of a caster going on versus caster this way. It's not the worst, but it's slightly forward, which is not ideal. You'd rather have it slightly back, but we can't really clock it back any further due to our suspension shock setup. So that'll have to do for now, or we just leave it with the portals going the other way. How low is this? Let's look. And it's not crazy low. Again, it's hard to tell because I don't have the camera there, but there you go. I mean, it's not like it's super low, but it does lower the axles in the wheel, right? So if you look at it, the axle is in C-hub, or right about here, versus having that much clearance and this much clearance. But again, it's a monster truck. It's not a rock crawler. When we move this stuff to the top, there'll be even more clearance towards the front here, right? Because you're going to move your links to the top. All right, so we flipped the fronts, and I'm not sure if I really like it. It does lower it quite a bit in the front. Also, when we put our body on, you can see it just kind of lowers it a lot in the front. Not the best. I wish it wasn't quite as low. Another issue is you can feel it in the steering. When you try to turn the wheels, it doesn't want to turn because it's angled down. So it's like pushing into the ground, right? Like you're pushing in like this because of the angle of the axle. The axle needs to be rotated back and then it would steer much better. So I fear that our steering is going to be real bad in that regard. And then also when you put our steering link in, the steering link is going to be much higher because of where it is on the portal now. It's on the top, which means our actual drag link here is going to be way too high for our servo. So we'd have to modify that some. So I think we're just going to flip them back and run the fronts normal, and the rears can be lower, or we'll put them back to the extended length. I just don't want to mess with the steering geometry too much because it will hurt the steering quite a bit. I mean, you can see how they naturally just fall forward, just being flat. You want them to naturally fall back. So we're going to try to make this little rocket motor here. It's a Surpass Rocket RC 5500. We're also going to use their ESC. It's an 18 amp little ESC. And we're going to try to fit it in here. Now, it's not going to just fit in nicely. I think we have to do some potential trimming. I don't even know if this will work, but we're going to try. We're going to get this pinion on, and then we're going to try to see how close, yeah, I don't know. It looks almost like the pinion won't reach, even if we're able to mount this motor here. We need a larger pinion. Well, I guess first let's get this motor to mount. We really probably need another motor plate. So something cool about this Benedictari transmission, it actually has like a slipper clutch in it. I think all the other transmissions are just the plate goes straight up to the shaft, and there's no slipper action at all. This allows you to adjust how tight. Well, there's no spring. That's interesting. Usually on a slipper clutch, like on a Mini B or something, there's a spring and the nut, and the spring kind of keeps pressure, but it's not super tight. But I guess here we're just using the nut. It basically tightens this up against like the pad. It's kind of like a clutch, you know. It's like just a clutch pad. It presses up against the plate. It's probably going to be good for a high-speed motor, so that seems all right.
A little longer than a few minutes later.
We got this thing in here, and we decided to do it the hard way, which was to basically fab it up and cut and drill and sand and mill and Dremel. Lots of this to make holes and move things and get it to work. So this pinion that we have wasn't a 2mm. We're doing this all wrong. I'm just going to tell you, but it just shows that if you try and you put a little effort in and you know what you're doing, you can kind of make things work. So this was a 2mm shaft on the Surpass, but this pinion was probably a 1.5. So we drilled it out. Now, obviously, we tried to keep it as straight as possible, but we didn't put it in a vise. We don't have a bench press or anything like that. We just dremeled it, and it's a little shaky. It just moves. I don't know if you can really see it. It's so minor, but it's enough to put little marks in our spur. And we know that's not right, but it's smooth. We ran it for a little bit. I think it was just barely off. We ran it for a while, and it seems fine. Again, we're just trying to fit things together, and if it breaks, then we'll fix it. We'll put better stuff in. More, we can get a bigger. We should have gotten a bigger pinion. That way, the motor could have been a little bit further away, and a proper, obviously, 2mm pinion. But we didn't want the motor to overheat. We wanted to keep a small pinion on there because we didn't want to lose a bunch of torque. Not that we need a ton of torque, but we need enough to spin our big old wheels. And so we tried to go with the smallest pinion we had that we could make fit. And in doing so, that puts the motor very close. So I don't know if you can see here, but we had to Dremel the side of the motor here and the transmission case. If we pull the motor off and the transmission case off, you're going to see something very bad. This is very bad. I'm going to show you because it's just very bad. It's not good for sure, but it's working. And so I think we got very lucky, but I just want to show you this in case you ever get crazy and want to do some crazy stuff like this. Now, we already had this issue before with the Mini Z. We had a Mini Z, actually I have the book right here. We were running a 2500 in one of our Mini Zs, and we had screws. We basically estimated. We were tired of our screws backing out, and we didn't have Loctite at the time, so we put some longer screws in, and I tell you what, that was a mistake, because the screws, even after going through the motor plate, just barely, maybe 0.5 millimeter, touched the red coiled wires. And you probably can't see, but if you look down in there, you might be able to. You can see silver instead of red. And you can see the red paint, maybe, right there, rubbed off onto the red coating. It's not paint. The red coating. And we just tightened it down just enough to where we ruined the motor, and now the motor cogs. Because on one side we were okay, but on the other, it was so close. On the other side, we were not okay, and it probably scraped off some of the coating and the wires touched each other, the wrapped wires, and now there's like a dead spot. So as it goes, it cogs, and then it'll go because it's trying to spin. If you know how brushless works, it's trying to catch the magnets and get a consistent spin. And the pulsing's not matching, and it's dead in one spot, so it just cogs, and it gets really hot. The motor gets really hot. So that's just something of note. Don't put too long of screws in. You can damage your motors. Make sure you're not going any deeper than this spacing here. You want to make sure you've got at least a 0.5 millimeter before you touch, because you don't want to get close. So we had to Dremel this side down just a little bit to get our pinion close enough. And on our transmission, you can see we even went through the transmission housing, and we had to go all the way to an exposed gear. Not ideal. Again, you can fix that with a bigger pinion. If you have a larger pinion, you can the motor will be further away, and you won't have to deal with that. And there's adjustable motor mounts, and there's companies out there that make them. Mofo, you basically can make your own. It's pretty easy, but Mofo's got some, and I think Hot Racing has one. I think Trio has an adjustable motor plate, and it just allows you to adjust how far away your motor is from your pinion or from your spur. And we didn't want to deal with that. We've made plenty of motor mount. This was totally botched, but whatever. It works. It's working. We tried to do one set of screws, and then we had to do another, and so we just kind of ended up putting in more space than we wanted. If we were to take another motor plate, which we've got one, we can remake it. And this one actually might work better because it's got 4 holes instead of the 2, depending on how we line up here. I don't know. Maybe it'll be worse, actually. Problem is, when you start to hollow out the hole for the motor, this little lip here on the motor, you start to take away where your screws mount, right? So we tried to mount it like this at first, and that wasn't working. We couldn't get close enough, so we backed it up, and we were able to get it like this, but then it leaves a big giant gap there, and then it kind of screws our bottom hole here. Either way, we're still good, but if we were to redo it with another motor plate, we would have a better, we'd know how close we are now and how close we need to be, and we could better drill and mill out our hole for our motor as well as our 2 screw mounts. Either way, we're good though. But look at this. When we were dremeling down our motor, we just, and it just took and I felt the larger piece come off, and I'm like, oh no, and sure enough, we took off just a little bit too much. Lucky. I don't know if we just got super lucky, or where it happened is not as big of a deal, or maybe it is, still get a little bit, but I'm not noticing the cogging, but maybe there's a little bit of performance issue or loss, but it's running, and it runs smooth. It seems to run really smooth, and we just put some conformal coating, the stuff used for electronics, on there. Since it's exposed wires, we don't want it shorting out when it touches on the aluminum or anything like that. So we put some conformal coating on there, let it dry, and put another coat on there. Didn't want to make it too thick, but just enough, and it seems fine. Here, I'll go ahead and hook it up real quick, and I'll show you what we're working with. This is our servo from an FCX24. This is a Mini Z micro board for our Fly Sky Noble. We're using our regular Noble, our Pros upstairs. So that's working, and seems to be working just fine. It's not cogging. When I put a little bit of resistance on there, it doesn't cog, except at really low speeds, kind of. It doesn't even really cog. Its startup is a pretty high RPM. It's a 5500, but it seems fine. It seems smooth. It's not getting hot. You always want to, if you do something like that, you got to test it. Make sure you're not going to get too hot. Make sure you're not going to fry your other electronics. My ESC doesn't get hot that I can tell. So we're just going to run with it. Anyway, let me put it back in here and I'll show you with it in the trans. So here we are back in the transmission transfer case, whatever. You can see it's still smooth, right? It's a little crunchy sounding, but hold this. Again, I sat there and ran it for a while. Didn't get hot. Put resistance on it. It actually, the slipper clutch moved before, so you can see I'm not moving here, but the motor's spinning. That's because there's like a slipper clutch in there. It's one of the cool things about this transmission. It seems fine. Now, I know I'm going to get hate. I know I'm going to get tons of hate in the comments, and I am okay with that. You do you. I'm going to do me. I didn't want to wait for parts to come in. I just wanted to build it with what I had. And again, when it breaks, we'll get new parts. We'll do it up more appropriately. When I have to order parts, of course I'm going to order the right ones. But this is what we had, so we're doing it. That's crazy. If you're watching this in HD or in 4K, you can see aluminum flying off, because there's still aluminum from when I was milling it. There's like aluminum in the air floating around. Anyway, all right, we're gonna get this back on. We also had to like mill the case a little bit because we're using a little more beefy screws. It's regular M2s, and then our shaft stuck out. We could have trimmed the shaft off, but again, we might use this motor on something else some other day. I don't know. So we didn't want to trim the shaft just in case we put it in something else. Having a hole here isn't a big deal. Hate away, guys. Tell me in the comments below, how much do you hate my setup? How much do you hate it? Or do you like it? I don't know. Maybe. Maybe. Let's go. We might need to adjust that slipper clutch because it looks like there's a little bit of delay in our starting before the wheels turn, tires turn. Especially when you do reverse and then forward, you can see it. It's basically the slipper clutch is just slipping, which is what it's supposed to do. We just we need to make it a little tighter. Maybe. Let's get it going. Throw it on the ground, and then we'll know. Okay, if you on us in the comments, you were right. It was just off too much. We need to get a proper pinion. We totally jacked our spur up. Oh no! But it went. We should have recorded some of it. I just wanted to test it. It went. We did wheelies, but it does not look good. No, we stopped it before it totally screwed up. I mean, that's pretty bad. I don't know. maybe if we get a correct pinion, it'll be salvaged. It feels like it's mostly there. It doesn't look like it's really stripped out too bad. There's a lot of, oh, this spot looks kind of rough. It's only on the front though. I don't know if you can tell. The front, because this, again, it's kind of wobbling. It's doing this as it spins, right? Well, like this. The back side isn't as bad as this front. The front looks really bad right here, but it's still got a lot of tooth on there. But like I said, we're gonna go order up a new pinion. We're probably gonna get 2 different sizes. We have another motor plate we'll use if we need to move it out more than this motor plate can handle. We actually have some Mofo motor plates, which is where we're getting our pinion from. And then worst case, we'll just buy another transmission. These transmissions are only like 20 bucks. And we're getting a brass pinion, so it'd be nice to have this brass as well. That way they're matching. Because when you don't match, you start to chew things up. That's probably the issue here. Is that's a steel pinion and this is a brass spur. That's not the only. Obviously, it's not the issue, but it's what it is part of why it ate it up so quickly. Even though it's just barely off. Okay. Like I said, 20 bucks for this transmission with a slipper in there. Plus that gives us backup slipper and backup internal gears. If you try to go buy a hardened steel spur or a brass spur anywhere else, it's going to cost you like 15 bucks. So 5 bucks more, get a whole transmission. Might as well. So while we were running our little monster truck, we lost one of the screws in the body panels because we didn't have them fully tight because we were trying to fit the motor in there and whatnot. And I was like, man, when we went and run it, did a little test run out in the street and drove it up the driveway, drove it through our long ass grass. And it was hopping through the grass. It was awesome. And I got inside and I'm like, oh man, we lost a screw. And I'm like, you know, I've had good luck finding screws before. And we walked outside. I'm like, I'm probably not going to find it. It's a tiny little screw. We're walking and we're looking and I walk down the sidewalk, coming like this. And then what do we have here? It's just chilling there. What are the chances? Out of all the places we drove up and down the street, jumped the curb a few times. Like I said, drove through the grass, came over here, did a couple spin outs. We found it. What the heck?
1 billion zillion jillion dillion cotillion times later.
All right, so we got our Mofo pinion gears. We're going to start with the 18 tooth first, the larger pinion, just because we figure why not. We'll probably end up using the 16 on a crawler. We kind of want the speed, so we'll go with the larger pinion on this guy. And you can see the previous transmission. But something I wanted to point out, it wasn't all just me in my pinion, because this is the pinion we were using. And again, it was like a 1.5 millimeter shaft, and we drilled it out to a 2. And I was like, well, man, it seems like it's wobbling. You could feel there be resistance as you spun it, almost like the pinion was wobbling, but it wasn't very noticeable. Then, as I took it apart, I realized it wasn't just the pinion that was off, just a little bit, just barely. You could barely even tell. Like I said, you couldn't even really see it too much. But more so, this was off. The actual spur gear was slightly off. And you can see wear around it, so it's kind of hard to tell. But if you put your finger in one spot and you spin it, it hits on it in more spots. See, like there it's hitting. And then it breaks loose. So it's kind of wobbling around. And what it is because you have, this is a different kind of transmission, right? This has got a slipper in it. And so now partly is that this brass, I wish, was a little more precise on the shaft. But if your slipper clutch pad, this pad, isn't sitting flush, you could be slightly off. And if you're at any kind of an angle like this, then as it goes around, it's going to wobble, and that's going to cause really bad mesh. So you've got to be very careful when if you take this off. And also, I would check. I've got another one right here. Oh, we don't have the casing off, but you want to make sure it's not wobbling as it spins. You want to make sure it's sitting as center as possible on the shaft. I don't know if you can see it, but see how it kind of moves just a little. That little bit of slop can cause you a lot of headache on your pinion. So if you take this off, or when you get a new one, just check it and make sure. I'm not saying to take it off, but take your housing cover off, your transmission cover, and see if it's centered. And make sure that it's not actually wobbling on the slipper plate or slipper material. Okay? So we can see on this one, because I took it off and I was looking at it, I basically got my mesh up really nice, and then I slowly spun it from here. and made sure I had this nut just tight enough to where it would hold, but to where I could spin it and make it feel like there was no resistance at any point, right? It wasn't like it was wobbling at any point. And if it was, I could just kind of push on it or use the pinion to kind of push a little harder with the motor, just a little, and make sure it feels like, not too hard because you don't want to push off, but you just don't want it wobbling. And now it's nice and smooth. Got a good mesh, just enough play in there. We could probably go just a little looser, but this seems fine. It's not loud. And that should be pretty good. So we're gonna hook it up real quick. That sounds way better than it was. A lot of that noise of the drive shaft slapping around it. We still wonder if we damaged this motor, because it feels like it's got a little bit of a gap between 0 and any amount of RPM. Doesn't have a lot of real low end, and I wonder if that's just the motor or if we actually ruined it with the trying to shave it. The funny thing is we wouldn't have needed to shave it probably at all if we would have used a larger pinion. So it just goes to show when you're experimenting and doing weird stuff, you end up breaking things you don't intend to break, and there's better ways to do it. Again, first time doing this, so I'm learning. And, I'm just looking. I'm not like, didn't do a whole bunch of research, didn't try to find a bunch of info. We just like, let's do it. Let's do it. We're probably going to need to use some Loctite to keep our screws here. Actually, I don't know. I think we were very tight to start with, so. Anyway, just make sure your mesh is good. You want just a little bit of back and forth play, not so much that it'll strip. Alrighty, seems good. Let's get it back in. So we got it put back in, but if you notice, we're running this guy here. This is the 5500 Furitek. It's the Greyhound. It's meant for mini Z's, just like this guy is. So we were experiencing kind of some low end cogging. Well, cogging is almost always low end, right? But we think we damaged it. It seemed like at first it was fine, but the more we drove it, the more it started to get heated up and started to cog, and I think that we just trimmed it too much, which is a shame, because if we were just patient and got the correct pinion versus trying to make a pinion work, we might not have damaged a $25 motor. So the Surpass motor is out because it takes forever to get them, so we'll probably order another one at some point. But we do have a Surpass 5500 in this guy. It's the same motor right here, but it's staying in here. So we'll show this. Make sure you subscribe, and you'll know when we post a video about this guy here. But for now, we went ahead and went with the Furitek because it was another one that we had, and now that we have the correct pinion, we didn't have to trim it. It had plenty of spacing, all that good stuff. Our motor plate worked just fine, and now we're good. We're running mini Z batteries. They're basically this kind of an end. These are the best. I don't know why there aren't more. They try to, I guess because people's chargers can't really handle it, but there's ways. I mean, we have an adapter for our charger. We have a charge video, and you can see it here. It basically just plugs into the balance board and into your main lead, and you can use any of these ends. This is actually, the harness is designed to charge 3 of these at once, but we only ever do one. But you plug it in, and it's a balance charge. It basically charges through the balance cable. There is no main lead. These are the main leads. So it's still balanced, 2S. Just you don't need the extra wire, which is super nice in like the smaller rigs, because you don't have this extra balance cable hanging out and whatnot. You just run just one wire. Pretty sweet. Anyway, so we're running that because our ESC and receiver are Mini Z ESC and receiver. This is the Surpass ESC, and then we have a, I think this one's a DAS Micro receiver for our Noble NB4. And then of course this. So we could run this in a Mini Z setup as well, but we're gonna run it in the monster truck. Another thing, while we were kind of bashing it around, testing this, we were popping the drive shaft pretty easily, right in here. So we took a little bit of wire heat shrink for your wires and stretched it around and heated it up, and now hopefully our U-joint won't keep popping out. You know, the little center ball joint kept popping out of this side So hopefully that will help keep it tight and prevent it from popping out. We made some custom links. Basically ordered up, we'll put links to these. They're Amazon links. These are the M2s. We got a whole bunch of different little links. These little link bars are freaking expensive. They're like $2 a piece. And some of the ball ends are pretty pricey too. They're like $1 a piece essentially. But what we noticed is these Injoras will use the same links. So if you want to get cheap end links for the SCX, the M1.4s, you can basically for $17 buy the Injora links, and you get all the link ends, even if you don't want to use the bars, for basically the same price, because you get 16 link ends, which is what you need to do a full link set. In this setup, we used a little bit of half and half. This end is the FCX24 M1.4s, and this end are the M2s. And we're just using the Injora links because they were fine length. We're okay with it. So that's that. Injora shocks all around. The Injora chassis. We've got magnet mounts up here for eventually what will be our monster truck body. Kind of wish the chassis was a little longer in the front. We know it's not made for monster trucks. We are well aware. If the chassis came out just a little further and had more shock mounting points in the front, just a little bit longer, maybe a Gladiator version, might have been a little better. I mean, it's nice and centered here. That's good. Maybe shifted back a little bit, and we could have shifted this back just a tad, but I don't know. Things kind of don't set up right with the tires and the wheels. Anyway, there's some tweaking we can do. Plus, we kind of feel like we want to build this out, this model kit, and try to get the cage and whatnot, and maybe we'll be able to. I think the motor actually goes in the back on this guy, though, so I don't know if that'll work, but we'll figure it out. If worst case, this is how we run it. Well, with the windshield and interior and whatnot, and the cage and the paint. Maybe we'll do some side work. Don't know. Pretty cool, though. This guy's not even. We just use tape to hold it together because it's a two-piece body. Yeah, fun. Injora wheels and tires. Don't forget about that. But everything else, all the axles. So the axle, the servo, that's all FCX from FMS. We're done. Let's go drive it. to a drive shaft. We even heat shrinked it. Oh well. Alright, so we were using regular SCX drive shafts, just the stock ones basically. We do have an aluminum one somewhere. I just don't want to look for it. On hand, I've got these beefier FMS for the FCX24s. They sent these out with one of my metal gears that they sent out. The metal portal gears, they actually included some drive shafts, I guess. We're not using them on the other rigs because they haven't broken yet. But this guy, I'm just tired of dealing with this drive shaft here. So we're going to throw the beefy one on the front and see how the rear fares with the stock drive shaft. It seems like the front one is constantly having problems. I don't know if it's just maybe a weak drive shaft or maybe there's more stress on the front. Probably a little bit of both. And so we'll just use these beefier ones. Again, they've got like metal pins in them. Not on both sides. Just one side's got the metal pin, but they're beefier. They're definitely a little thicker. All right. Seems fine. It was very close. It almost rubs on this link under full compression. You can see right here. Maybe a little. No, I don't think it actually is. I mean, I'm sure if I pushed on it hard enough, it would. Yeah, it's hitting a little there. You can see it. But again, that's under absolute full compression. And we're probably not going to ever really be hitting that. Our shocks are pretty stiff. Actually, this one should be a little more stiff. Because we like them. It's not a crawler, right? We don't want a bunch of flex. We want some preload on there. Seems good. Yeah. All right, let's go. All right, guys, I hope you had fun watching the video of this build. Hopefully you were inspired to maybe build your own. You learned something. We had a blast with it. It's just fun to kind of bash around and be able to go fast and make jumps and go through the dirt. And let's see, we're pretty dirty here. Kind of scratched up, but it's okay. At some point we'll sand her down and paint her up, and hopefully we can get it to look something like that. I don't know if I've got the patience and the skill, I guess, to build up a car like that. It's been a long time since I built a model. I mean, look at this. I built this guy back in, I don't know, I was probably 16 years old, maybe 15. Can't really see the details in there. I don't got the lighting, but it's all detailed out. But that was like the one and only model kit I fully built, painted, did everything. Got the wires, distributor wires, spark plug wires, battery plugs. Anyway, guys, so hopefully we can get something cool with this, but I don't know. I like to build these guys and drive them and smash them and bash them and crash them right now. But yeah, the FCX axles are awesome. The shocks have been great. We did have a lot of motor issues, and well, not motor necessarily, and not fault of the motor, but fault of me just being kind of wanting to get it done now and not being patient to get the correct parts. So tip there, if you know the parts you need to get, you should probably just get them. We were hoping we could make it work with what we had, and we probably could have. We learned some things along the way, especially with this spur gear. I don't know if you can see it down in there. That spur gear, it doesn't sit center if you're not careful, because it's on a slipper plate, basically. So the top just sits on top of it. It doesn't actually connect to the shaft, so it's hard to make sure it's completely center. But if we would have focused on the centering of that a little bit more, we probably would have been fine with our pinion that we had and the motor that we had. We definitely shouldn't have sanded the motor down, ground the motor down as much as we did. That was a big oops. Everything else is good though. Finally got our drive shaft good. We smashed it some more and it seems fine. We do need to get a metal servo horn at some point. I was actually talking to people in the group before, and I was like, the servo horn would seem fine. And then, of course, as soon as I make a post, it's like, I don't know, everybody's needing metal servo horns for these FCX servos. Mine slightly strips out, and I just super glued it on. We'll be able to pull it off and get the super glue off the spline when we do get a metal horn. But it's holding for now. It's good. And yeah, make sure you Loctite any screws that have nuts on them. These little tiny nuts, we had to put extra long screws in. It's not really focusing there, sorry. But we had to put longer screws in and then Loctite it because we did have our shocks pop out a couple times. Anytime you have metal into metal, Loctite. Don't Loctite into plastic though, it'll degrade the plastic. Yeah, anyway, it was fun. So if you enjoyed or learned something from the video, make sure you share and like and hit that subscribe button. It only takes a second for you, but it means the world to me, and I appreciate all the subscribers. Also, comment down below, Crusha. Let's put Crusha down there. Let me know you watched this whole video by putting Crusha down in the bottom. All right, guys, get out there, run your cars, have fun, take care.